This is the story of the placing of 8 blue plaques on buildings in Silsden between the years 2017 and 2024. Silsden has a long and fascinating history. Lost in the mists of time, it was an agricultural settlement under the thumb of the lords of Skipton Castle. In more recent centuries, however, it grew into a bigger place altogether, a place of industry with a proud heritage, a place able to stoutly stand up for itself without the need for lordly oversight. There's a lively debate about whether it should be called a town or a village. Today it has a splendid town hall, a fine high street and some impressive stone buildings that boast an industrial heritage fit to grace any town. And yet it's easy to get straight out into the fields on all sides without having to go very far at all, a major characteristic of village life. However you might wish to describe Silsden, it cannot be disputed that it's a place worth exploring. Come on a journey through discovery, delving into the rich history of this place of surprises, through the stories of the 8 blue plaques. In the autumn of 2016, when building contractors were preparing the ground beside Millbanks off Keighley Road, they discovered buried cellars and unearthed a large inscribed stone. On investigation, it was found to have originally adorned the facade of the Oddfellows Hall that had once stood there. Harron Homes stored the discovered stone plaque on site. Silsden Town Council and Silsden Local History Group liaised with the builders over what could be done to display it for posterity. As a result, the stone was finally installed in a garden wall on High Banks, just inside the new estate. Silsden Local History Group arranged for a blue plaque, their very first plaque, to be fitted alongside the stone in 2018. Who were the Oddfellows? They were established as a friendly society, likened to being a poor man's masons. The society was set up at a time where there was no welfare state to protect ordinary working men and their families. Many of the early members in Silsden were nail makers. The Oddfellows acted as a mutual savings club. Members paid a subscription into a common fund, from which they were entitled to claim for such eventualities as paying for burial costs. The society offered protection in times of sickness, unemployment and economic downturn. An Oddfellows Lodge had been established in Silsden as early as 1832, calling itself the Earl of Thanet's Lodge. This first lodge met in an upper room of what is now the Beckside Cafe overlooking the weir in the centre of town. It was a member of the Independent Order of Oddfellows. We'll come across it again when we consider the blue plaque on the cafe. In the middle of the 19th century, a group of lodges calling themselves the Grand United Order of Oddfellows separated from the original order. As a result, in 1851, a new lodge belonging to this breakaway group was established in Silsden. It called itself the St James Lodge. It was the members of this new St James Lodge who erected the grand new building on Keighley Road, the cellars of which Harron Homes had uncovered. It was an imposing 3-storey edifice with pointed upper windows. It could have passed for a chapel if it were not for the lower floors being obviously workers' cottage dwellings. The Oddfellows membership met in a large overall hall on the top floor. The stone was a prominent feature of the building's facade. And the inscription reads, Oddfellows Hall, St James Lodge No. 226 of the Grand United Order under the GM, AD 1851. GM stands for the Grand Master of the Order. When the Oddfellows moved out, the upper hall was used by Silsden's Catholic community as their first church. When they moved out in 1957, the once iconic building sadly deteriorated. It was knocked down in 1962 when old back-to-back housing was being cleared by the council. Some of the stone was used to fill in the cellars. It was then that the carved stone plaque was buried in the rubble. Our story is one of chance discovery. In the autumn of 2018, the Local History Group erected a second plaque commemorating the original site of the town's cenotaph. Today, Silsden's War Memorial is to be found in the Memorial Gardens. It's a plain stone column engraved with the names of the fallen. It is graceful in its simplicity, raised upon a low plinth and modestly edged with a simple chain. When it was unveiled in 1921, it stood close to the roadside at the bottom of Bolton Road, next to the bridge over Bradley Beck. It was positioned within a 3-sided enclosure, edged by a stone wall with substantial railings above. This original walling exists to this day. The Civic Society, now disbanded, was to place 2 benches at the old site years after the cenotaph was moved. The Local History Group, with the help of grants from the Harry Tillotson Trust and the Cooperative Society, renovated the original site. The railings and the benches were repainted, and unattractive concrete paving slabs that had once filled the footprint left exposed when the memorial and its plinth had been taken away were replaced with attractive flagstones. The centrepiece of the new flagged floor is now a carving of a poppy with the words "Lest we forget." At the same time as the site was renovated, Silsden's Friends of Green Places placed planters there, attractively filled with small trees and bulbs, which they ably maintain. If we were able to go back to the day that the memorial was unveiled on Saturday the 12th of November 1921, we'd see an official group reverently assembled for the opening service. We'd also observed 15 children whose fathers had been killed in the Great War. Each of the 15 children will be holding a silken cord attached to a laurel wreath, and on a signal we'd see them pull together, allowing the wreath to be lowered and the covering withdrawn, so unveiling the new cenotaph. We'd be part of a very solemn occasion, as the onlookers would each be lost in their own memories. Standing alongside the children on the day was Miss Hannah Faulkner, aged 25. Hannah was the sister of 5 brothers who all went to fight. 3 of them had died at the front, and a 4th, Tommy, the eldest, twice wounded, gassed and shell-shocked, was then incarcerated in Menston Asylum, where he eventually died. Her 5th brother William was too young to fight. He'd enlisted but had been sent home wounded. The moment would have been very poignant for her. As traffic increased in the middle of the 20th century, the position of the cenotaph became increasingly unsuitable, and it was eventually moved across the road into the Memorial Gardens in 1957 to be in a more peaceful and spacious setting. The annual Remembrance Service is still a time of thoughtful reflection on what we owe the brave men of Silsden who went to fight for their country. In 2019, a third blue plaque was erected on the facade of the Red Lion public house on Kergate. The Red Lion started life as a medieval farmstead, amongst others that lined the west side of an agricultural trackway, now known as Kergate. The farmstead would probably have consisted of a crook house known as a toft, with low walls and a thatched roof. By the early 1700s, the enterprising Horn family were living at the property. It was far from being just a lowly farmstead. It had become a parlour with chambers above and a kitchen, lumber room, barn and stabling for horses. There was a brew house and a cellar. John Horn was an innkeeper. Over the years, the building's victuallers have pursued other occupations, such as making shoes and blacksmithing. Remnants of the inn's stables and a blacksmith's forge still remain. By the end of the 18th century, the Red Lion had a licence to sell spirits alongside beer. It also offered meals and accommodation to travellers. Not long after the start of the 19th century, Kergate was upgraded from a rutted lane to become the new main road through the village. At the same time, a fine stone bridge was built over the river to Steeton, connecting Silsden with the principal highway along the Aire Valley. The Red Lion found itself in an ideal position to attract new customers, with its welcoming hospitality, stabling and accommodation. The Red Lion became a centre of social and cultural life under the musically talented Weatherhead family. The Weatherhead years were something of a golden time for the Red Lion. The inn became a centre of musical entertainment in the Victorian age. An assembly room was built above the brew house and stables. It became for a time the practice hall of the Silsden Brass Band, which blossomed under the Weatherhead's guidance, becoming nationally renowned. The Silsden Orchestral Society was also started up. Singing was especially fostered, and Sunday afternoons at the Red Lion became legendary, especially for the rumbustious renditions of Handel's oratorios. The family encouraged talented singers and musicians to visit and perform in their assembly room. The inn also catered for the working man. During the late 1850s, hundreds of navvies came to Silsden to build the new reservoir. The Red Lion hosted them with dinners of roast beef and plum pudding and rousing musical entertainment. The inn must have burst at the seams to accommodate all those who wanted to attend. With the encouragement of the Weatherheads as landlords, the first evening classes for workers in Silsden started to be held at the inn. Lectures given in the upper room were on topics as varied as botany, philosophy, local history and debating. The inn became an active meeting place where prominent men in the town came together to explore ways to improve their community. It was at the Red Lion that the building of a mechanics institute was fervently discussed and promoted, leading to a huge fundraising effort, and that led to the setting up of a subscription to raise the necessary finance. The project came to fruition when a mechanics institute was finally opened on the plot next to the parish church in 1884. Throughout the 19th century, the inn hosted official meetings in common with other inns in Silsden. There were property auctions and also inquests. The The Red Lion has had a glowing history, its publicans and customers alike encouraging and enhancing the advancement of Silsden, supporting its development from being an enterprising 19th century village into a bustling and proud 20th century town. 2020 saw us erect a fourth blue plaque on the facade of what is now the Beckside Cafe, overlooking the weir in the centre of Silsden. The building was Silsden's post office for about 100 years, and before that it was the meeting place of the first lodge of the Oddfellows Friendly Society in Silsden. We have to go back to the year 1847 to uncover the origin of the building. It is the end property of a short terrace of shops today, but they were originally built as workers' cottages fronting onto Kergate. The row was built for the Earl of Thanet's Oddfellows Lodge. They had their meeting hall on the upper floor of the end terraced house overlooking the weir. It's now an apartment above the cafe. It was the original Oddfellows Lodge in Silsden and continued to exist and meet after the breakaway St James Lodge established itself on Keighley Road. Up on the front of the building's facade facing Kergate is a stone plaque giving the date of the building and its connection to the Oddfellows. Throughout the 19th century, the building and adjoining cottages on Kergate remained the property of the Tuftons, the Earls of Thanet, Lords of Skipton Castle. The Oddfellows and the cottages were tenants of the Lord. At the time, the Tufton family owned the greater part of Silsden Township. In 1905, the Oddfellows Lodge eventually purchased the property they had been renting for so long. They then rented out the end terrace property, which became the new town post office. In 1972, William Cathy, the postmaster at the time, bought the freehold of the building from the trustees of the Oddfellows Society. The Cathy family were to run the post office there until 2017, when the last Cathy retired. Post office services were then moved to Twiggs newsagents lower down Kergate, where they are to this day. There's been a postal service of sorts in Silsden since 1840, when a local man named Sutcliffe, having collected the village's mail from Keighley, used to blow his horn near his home in Bridge Street to summon people to come and collect letters from him. Tips could be earned by youngsters running to summon people to collect their post. 2021 saw the placing of a blue plaque on a private residence, number 33 Keighley Road, locally known as Peck Hall. It's a strange name for an early Victorian villa. It was built in 1838, the year of Queen Victoria's coronation. This plaque was funded not by the History Group but by the owners of the property, Howard and Christine Barrett, who have a keen interest in its history. When the plaque was placed on the front of the house, it generated a lot of interest by passers-by, and it still does. The villa is a traditional stone-built double-fronted detached dwelling. The front entrance has a simple but handsome surround and the date stone 1838 on its lintel. It's constructed of local sandstone and was designed in the vernacular style of the time. It is simply executed, but nevertheless imposing for its size. It was a gentleman's residence when it was built. You might wonder who lived there. Well, his name was John Gill, and he was a coal merchant. There was money to be made in dealing in coal, particularly as a middleman between the colliers and the customers. John had been born the son of a nail-maker, but he inherited some family land in the Becks area when he was a young man. His inheritance gave him the chance to improve himself. He branched out as an entrepreneur, establishing himself in the coal business. Coal was readily transported by canal barge to the wharves of Silsden, and from there a coal dealer could collect and deliver coal throughout the village and the surrounding district. As well as domestic deliveries, there was the need for coal to fuel the steam engines powering the new textile mills. Steam engines required a lot of coal. In 1837, Beck's spinning mill was built on the turnpike leading into the village. It's likely that John delivered coal there. He built Peck Hall just along the road from the new mill. A tale reveals to us how John Gill's villa came to be called Peck Hall. During one particular severe winter, the canal froze solid, and attempts to break up the ice by the canal company failed. Coal could no longer be brought by boat from the Burnley collieries. The story goes that John exhausted his stock of coal long before the frost ended. To get over this difficulty, he went to Burnley with his horse and cart and brought coal back to Silsden along the towpath. It caused him to charge more for delivering to his customers. Coal was sold by the peck, and John added an extra penny on each peck of coal he sold. The local villagers were familiar with his villa on Keighley Road. They felt he was too quick to pass on the cost to them, rather than absorb it himself. His actions led the villagers to name his villa Peck Hall. Unfortunately for John, there's a sting in the tail of his coal business. He was declared bankrupt in 1848. His coal business failed. He overstretched himself financially at the time when there was a downturn in the economy. As a result of his bankruptcy, John Gill and his family left Peck Hall in much reduced circumstances. Before we move on, the villa has one more claim to fame in the history of Silsden. The new occupants of Peck Hall were Samuel and Sarah Berry. Samuel was a respected joiner. It was his son, John Berry, who went into partnership with Richard Fletcher to found the long-lasting and successful Silsden textile business of Berry and Fletcher. We have to move on to 2022 after the COVID pandemic before we find the sixth blue plaque. It's positioned on one of the posts of the entrance gates of what is now Mount Carmel Catholic Church. The plaque records the fact that the church had originally been the Wesleyan Methodist Chapel. The building was designed and constructed in 1870 in the medieval Gothic style of church architecture. It has pointed windows and an elaborately ornamental conical tower overlooking steeply sloping roofs. The plan of the chapel from above is cruciform, and the roofs have two-tone checkerboard diagonal tiles, which are quite arresting when seen from above. The new chapel replaced older premises on Highfield Lane. The congregation wanted a more central, more imposing structure, capable of seating more people. It was designed to sit 500. The new site was on a field directly opposite the parish church in the centre of the village. Silsden Beck runs behind the building in a deepening ravine, and at the front a short roadway was constructed, which today is called Wesley Place. The building was designed by Alexander Lorden of Barnstaple in North Devon. The coloured roof slates are similar to those found on churches in the Barnstaple area. The internal plan was for a nave and transept, with galleries above described as being light and elegant. The organ was originally placed centrally at the front of the chapel, raised high up, with the choir stalls below, all towering above a central pulpit itself reached by steps. In 1955, following the union of the town's three Methodist chapels, the primitive Methodist chapel on Kergate was chosen for the new United Church. The redundant Wesleyan Chapel went up for sale, and Silsden's Catholic congregation moved into the building in 1957. Remember, the Catholics had previously been worshipping in the old Oddfellows Hall on Keighley Road before its demolition. In 2023, we erected the seventh blue plaque on the front of the Town Hall, one of the most iconic buildings in Silsden. The building started life as a mechanics institute. The foundation stone was laid on a wet December afternoon in 1883 by Lord Hotfield and local mill owner George Jakes. The building opened up to the public a year later. It faces onto Kergate, up against the wall of St James's Churchyard, built on the site of a thatched cottage. The building was designed in the Italian Venetian style. It has a spectacular curvaceous glass window filling much of the upper floor, overlooking the street. The facade is flamboyantly classical. The design was executed by two Keighley architects, J.B. Bailey and W.H. Sugden. It's without doubt the most arresting and dramatic building on Kergate. The institute opened with a reading room, a conversation room, classrooms, a lecture hall, a shop, an office and a public lavatory, all heated by piped hot water. It quickly became a thriving centre for the community. Villagers, most of whom had never been able to afford such things, were able to borrow books, read an array of newspapers, go to evening classes, take part in noisy public debates, and listen to musical concerts. The regular facilities, along with a variety of special events, were instrumental in dramatically opening up opportunities for Silsdeners to improve themselves by becoming better educated. The Mechanics Institute was initially run by a board of trustees. In 1909, however, the trustees handed over the management of the building to the Urban District Council, and it became officially named the Town Hall. An extension was added at the back and an entertainment's licence obtained. A sprung dance floor enhanced the upper room, which became known as the ballroom. It is impressive to this day. The Town Hall remains at the heart of Silsden's social life. It regularly hosts exhibitions and community events, concerts and gigs, lectures and day classes, craft and tabletop sales, and also an annual pantomime, as well as being a polling station. It's a venue for many different clubs, groups and organisations, offering a variety of activities that local people of all ages can enjoy. Today, our town hall is once again run by a dedicated team of trustees, whose principal purpose remains to keep the building at the heart of our community. Recent 2025 City of Culture funding from Bradford Council has provided impressive upgrading of its internal facilities. In the autumn of 2024, we arranged for an eighth plaque to be placed on the building that was once the Picture Palace Cinema. The Picture Palace was Silsden's only cinema, first opened on Bradley Road in September 1912. Today, the building is a private residence. As the plaque tells us, it was launched in the era of the silent screen and the birth of Hollywood. As talkies arrived, it became immensely popular in the town, with films being screened twice nightly. There were 2 ticket offices and 3 classes of seating. The seats were colour-coded. The cheap seats were at the front under the screen, and the more expensive seats at the back. The building straddles Bradley Beck to this day. A memory persists of mischievous boys crouching down and splashing their way along the enclosed beck flowing under the floor of the cinema's auditorium, banging the infrastructure loudly to annoy the audience above. The Picture Palace showed films for 47 years, and it remained a popular place of entertainment until the arrival of television brought about its closure in 1959. The story of the cinema is told in a book written by Cathy Liddell. It can be borrowed from the archives library kept in the town hall. I hope you've enjoyed our journey through some of the hidden history of Silsden, as revealed in the stories told behind the 8 blue plaques. And when you find the time, walk the streets and find the plaques for yourself.